I like click subscribe to all that. You know what time it is. It's Netflix time. This movie's called Fever Dream. Just came out hour and a half long. Spoiler alert. Let's just get it. So here we see this lady named Amanda. She's being dragged on the ground and she's talking to this dude named David, but she's talking to him inside of her head. Now she's being dragged by somebody, but we're not really sure who. Now David wants Amanda to replay the events that took place from beginning to end. He wants to add all the details because I think he wants her to remember more than he does. So she talks to this lady named Carol, who just happens to be David's mother. And it looks like they're going from a pool to her car. David keeps telling her to ask her about the events about what happened in the garden. What garden? So we found out Amanda has a daughter by the name of Nina, and they're supposed to be heading to this vacation spot that their mom used to have, or old house that she originally died in when she was like 13. Now keep in mind, David is narrating to Amanda the entire time this is going on. Then on the way to the house, she crosses this bridge with a boat in there. And this is the first time we get a glimpse of David. He's actually in the boat. And to be clear, this is her first time seeing David. So how the hell is David talking to her inside of her head? Well, anyway, she finally gets to her mom's old house. And after she gets all settled in the house, she sees this lady walking past the fence. And this is her first time actually meeting Carol as she's bringing water to her establishment. She greets her neighbor and then asks for a glass of lemonade. They're basically getting each other, know each other a little bit and all that. Then we get back to the scene where they're talking in the car. Now she talks to her about her son named David, but she thinks there's something wrong with him. But Amanda doesn't understand why. So she starts telling her a story about her husband Elias. Now Elias had to deal with this guy about taking care of this black horse, worth about almost 200 grand. He said it was in his best interest to take care of him and raise him properly. But obviously, if anything happens to the horse, that'd be his ass. Meanwhile, we see them being a happy family. This is David when he was little, watching horses and taking care of them. By the way, he has two other horses besides from the black horse. One night he hears rustling in the barn, startled and gets up out of bed. But all the black horse was doing was hopping on top of other horses. So he goes back to his wife Carol and gives her the business. Later on the next day, he's got to go handle business, so he asks Carol to take care of the horses. For a couple hours, he'll be right back. So while Carol's watching after the horses and taking care of her son David while we're at it, she looks out in the stable for a minute and finds the black horse missing. But how the hell did the black horse get out when the other horses are still in the barn? So anyway, they go to look for the horse. Keep in mind, they're running through this brown field, which is very important. I'll explain that later. Anyway, she finds the black horse and brings it back to the spot. Now, David was playing around in the water, but they ended up going back to the house. Then they put a lot of focus on this dead bird that's in the water. And I thought to myself, was there something in the water? But like I said, we'll get to that in a minute. Then after that, we get a little deeper into the story. A couple days later, Carol and her husband hear some commotion outside, and the black horse was missing again. But this time it was closer to the house, and come to find out when they found him, he's laying on the ground, he looks pretty sick. Husband says it's too late for a veterinarian to come out here, so they're gonna try to do everything to keep the horse better inside the house. When she goes back in the house, she thinks something's wrong with David. We don't really know it yet, but she can tell something's wrong. So she tries to catch up with her husband because she thinks something's wrong with David, but he ends up dipping out already. He was already trying to get help for the horse. So she ends up going through the woods and getting on this boat and going across the river. So Amanda's thinking to herself, where exactly were you going? She ends up going to this greenhouse with this lady that apparently has a bunch of remedies for things. So I don't know if she has any psychic powers, but she could concur that the horse is going to be dead. She says that her son might be dead in a couple of hours too, unless she's allowed to do some type of transformation. See, the thing is, the black horse and David were poisoned by something, but we're not sure what. But she needs Carol's consent to do it, and Carol's like, of course, just do it. Now she said something about this transformation will transfer his soul out of his body and could possibly split into two different parts, but at the same time, it'll take a lot of the poison out of his body too. Whether this is possible or not, I couldn't even begin to tell you how this shit works. So basically, she did her thing, and it was a success, I guess. And this is where we were going to learn where David was talking to Amanda the entire time. We realized that part of his soul is inside of her body. But why her, though? And according to the old lady's description, if Amanda has one part of his soul, where's the other? So after the results, he's back, but he's definitely not the same little boy. So when we see Nina, she's acting fine, but Amanda's still thinking to herself, where could the other half of the soul be? Because she's still talking to David in her head, you know what I'm saying? So she kind of believes in it, but she kind of doesn't. So then they both go in the house and watch Carol get out the car and leave back and go to her house. Then they play with each other before falling asleep. Then while Nina's asleep, Amanda goes back outside to her car, picks up her purse, Nina's doll, and the ashtray. She rinses out the ashtray in the sink, gets a cig, looks at Nina's baby pictures, and the whole time David is still talking to her. He tells her to keep looking for details that's important to the story. Then he goes back to the first conversation she ever had with Carol. She was chilling talking to Nina at the time. Then we found out because of the black horse dying, Carol and them had to sell a lot of their property, including their house, to make up for it. While she was tidying up things, she seen David doing something outside. Turns out this dude was burying a dead duck. And not just one, several of them. But what was the reason for it? He says he found them in the water, but why would a kid be doing this? Especially somebody who was so happy-go-lucky like David. Yeah, so whatever happened in that greenhouse definitely changed him. Then we get to scene when Amanda, Carol, and Nina all just chilling by the water, just enjoying each other's company. And apparently David was there too, climbing in the background on trees. He's there with him, but he's never really with the group. Then later on, Amanda gets back at the house and she's talking to her husband, Marco, who's actually supposed to meet her eventually, but he's got a ton of work to do. He says he's trying to get out there as soon as he can, but you get that strange feeling he's not going to show up in time. But then for some reason, later night, she goes around looking around in the barn. She stops by the spot and she sees David again chilling with a skateboard. She's trying to figure out what he's doing out so late, but he just runs off. The next day, Amanda and Nina are chilling in this field. Now, keep in mind about this brown field, I want to tell you something, but it's important. I'll tell you later. Then she hears this little machine going off and it scares Nina, but it just lets off a sound to keep the birds away. Later on, they go to the store, and this lady has her daughter in there, who just keeps laughing at Nina, and he's thinking to herself, actually, Amanda's thinking to herself, could the other part of David's soul be inside her? Because keep in mind, David is actually talking to her a lot while all this is going on. Then after they're coming from the store, they see David just walking with a skateboard. She picks him up and gives him a ride back home. So when they get back home, David and Nina are just playing outside, and while he's with her, he's trying to conduct some kind of experiment. It's like water, dirt, and algae inside of a glass tube, which looks like headphones around it. I'm not even sure how to explain this. Amanda's talking with David like one-on-one, and it's about little simple things like having to have glasses of lemonade. He can come over as much as he wants. But the conversations she's having with the actual David are nowhere near the conversations she's having with David inside of her head. So later on, she chills out with her homegirl Carol. And the next day, Amanda teaches Carol how to drive. But not really, they just go in circles. But Amanda accidentally bumps her head as Carol hits the brake too hard. So she checks on her to make sure she's okay, she's good and all that. Then they go out to this little spot ready to go for a swim. So it's getting parts of her vision where Amanda's saying that she can't remember, but David tells her to keep pushing on. Tells her to try to remember every little detail of the situation. Later on, Carol's saying all these things to Amanda while she's asleep. To Nina, my bad, stating that she's always wanted a little girl of her own. And that's when Amanda comes back over to give her lemonade. So it gets to the point, like this is the point where they're first around the pool where it started at the beginning. And parts of Amanda are still trying to remember everything that took place, leading up to her getting dragged in the woods. We find out David was the one that was actually dragging her around. But why? What is he trying to accomplish? And it showed him putting her on a boat. Yeah, he's trying to take her somewhere, but where? And the point is, why? So we go back to this part where she's chilling with her daughter. But the thing they didn't show us before is when she woke up, her daughter was missing. So she went to the kitchen and all of a sudden Marco was right there. She asks where Nina, and Marco tells her she's in the kitchen. But when she gets to the kitchen, Nina tells her that this was all an experiment. So Amanda's looking all confused, like, what the heck is going on? So this is when Marco tells Nina to be like, hey, tell her the situation. So Nina tells her that she's actually David. I'm like, oh shit. So wait a minute, Nina actually has the other part of his soul? What the fuck? But then she wakes up and Nina's laying right next to her. So now she's conflicted. Was the stuff she's seeing really took place or not? So she's not really convinced that happened because Marco isn't there. But she's still thinking to herself this could possibly happen because one, she knows one part of David's soul is inside of her. All of a sudden, next day she goes for a swim and she hears a horse. So basically gets her alarm and turns around. So we're all thinking it's nothing. She gets back in the car. But all of a sudden this black horse goes by. It's like, what the fuck, is that the same horse? So I'm thinking to myself, are we seeing shit? Is this supposed to be some type of sign? Or is this a totally different black horse? Like, what's going on? So she goes back to her house and finds out David has locked herself inside with Nina. Amanda breaks the window open to get inside, but Nina was just laying on the bed, and David was under the bed for some reason. We were like, what the fuck? So Amanda spazzes out on Carol about her son, and she basically tells him to go home. But when she tries to get some sleep later on in the day, David actually snuck back into her house, but for what reason? Is it because his soul is connected to her or something? Then she forces David out the house. He broke the bottom window and scrawled the hell out of there. She gets her daughter Nina, and they about to get the hell out of town. But even after all that, she still wants to apologize to Carol because she goes to her place of work and she pretty much waits for her. While they were waiting, Nina was playing and she said her dress got wet. She told her it was probably like honeydew or something. She finally gets to talk to Carol, she clears the air. It's like, look, it wasn't you I wasn't mad at. I was mad about David. They go out there to hash out their differences and talk about David. Now, Amanda's been able to move from place to place, but Carol has never left this town. She's always wanted to get out, but she's always felt tied down to it. And then Amanda lays back in the grass. And while she's laying back, once again, David is still talking to her, like explaining the rest of the story. Then we get back to the scene where David is actually rowing her in a boat. Then she's talking to Carol again, looking pretty dehydrated. Next thing we see is this scene of Amanda being in the hospital and Carol walking away from her. What does this mean? And Nina lies next to her mom and says that she's so thirsty. It seems like both of them are dehydrated at this point. Wait a minute. Then we find out she really needs help and she's got low blood sugar. Wait a minute, where the heck is Nina at? So Carol got the bed set up so Amanda and Nina could get some rest. But I think Carol sensed the same thing about what happened to David and the horse. I think she thinks that both of them have been poisoned. But how? So later on, Amanda wakes up. Nina's still laying there next to her. She saw David at the window and spooked her, so she's ready to leave out again. She's driving with Nina in the car, but she could barely even function. Then she almost hit this group of special kids at night. Now, first off, what are they doing out at night? They all just happen to be crossing the road in the rain, right? And it seems like she's basically about to pass out behind the wheel. When she gets out the car, she ain't seen nobody. She ends up walking around to the front of the car and passing out right there. And this is how she wound up in the hospital. Now, a while ago, I think Carol knew she was going to be able to take care of Nina or whatever. When Amanda kind of suggested it, Carol took it to heart. But I think the thing is, Carol knew about them being poisoned. And we found out Amanda's in the hospital by herself. And he's like, where's Nina? It turns out Nina's at the greenhouse. Oh, shit. So now Amanda escapes the hospital. She's trying to make her way towards Nina. Then she starts reflecting back about the situation. Now, it turns out in the beginning, David says something about the worms. And we're like, what worms is he talking about? The worms that sit inside of this brown field and they look kind of different. The point is, these brown fields get sprayed with a lot of pesticides. And that's what poisoned them. But if that be the case, how come Carol was never poisoned? And as she was running to get to Nina, this is where she passed out at. And this is why David was dragging her to help her to get her on the boat so she can get to Nina. But the sad thing is, on the boat ride, Amanda ends up dying on the boat. So here we see Marco, and apparently a whole year has gone by. He goes over to see Carla's husband. Carol's husband, my bad. He wants to really know what's going on with Nina because apparently Nina's with him right now. But he doesn't really know anything about the situation, or so he lets on. So he's about to leave out, but David hops in his car. But his dad ends up pulling him out. With no answer to his questions, Marco rolls out so he can go back to his daughter Nina. The last thing we see is David staring off as Marco drives off. And I got real confused about the Souls thing. And I thought to myself, is this supposed to be just a drama-based movie? So maybe the time they was narrating when David was talking to Amanda the entire time was probably the time that she was in the boat. But I can't believe they were talking to themselves that amount of time for a certain amount of time that they were only on the boat. You know what I'm saying? Fever Dream on Netflix. Check it out. Like, click, subscribe, do all that. You already know what time it is. Look, these are the easy miss. Big. You got that slogan.